Rishi Nagar, news director and host for Calgary's Red FM 106.7, addressed the media on Tuesday for the first time since being assaulted by two men on the streets of Calgary over his reporting on extortion and crime. I was at the media event where Nagar described the attack as one on the freedom of the press and the integrity of journalism. I'm Isaac Lamoureux, your host of the Alberta Roundup. To this point, I've been tracking which week this was hosting the show, but I've already lost track. I'm pretty sure we're at the 1 month mark, so it seems a good a time as any to stop tracking. I'll have to think of another way to introduce the show. Maybe something like, welcome back to the Alberta Roundup, the one and only show you need to keep up to date on the province's happenings. Perhaps if I'd been in the business since 1999 like Rishi Nagar, I'd have established a good introduction by now. But let's just jump back into that story. The assault on Rishi Nagar, which occurred on Sunday, is believed to be connected to his reporting on extortion and criminal activity within the South Asian community. However, he said he did not believe the attack to be politicized because Canadians have freedom of speech, press, and expression. Nagar addressed the media on Tuesday with a bandage wrapped around half of his face, covering his eye. He said he hoped not to be seen as a victim, but as a voice for the integrity and necessity of journalism. These injuries are for sure painful, but what wounds me more deeply is the intent behind this assault, said Nagar. A clear attack on journalism and on the free press. This was not a personal attack on me alone. This was an assault on the very principles that bind us as a free and democratic society. The journalist, who as I mentioned has been in the business since 1999, said he has spent most of his career reporting on the extortions and criminal activities affecting South Asian communities, which he added continue to grow. He said, quote, I want to make one thing abundantly clear. I will not be silenced. These cowardly actions will not deter me or my colleagues from continuing our work, nor will they dissuade the press from reporting on matters of public interest. They can break my eye, they cannot break my resolve. Journalism is the cornerstone of a free society, and without it, corruption, crime, and injustice would go unchecked. Nagar revealed that the doctors told him he risks retinal detachment and choroidal rupture in his eye because there is so much blood inside of it. He said he'll get a further update on October 8th. He was attending a political event at a banquet hall when he stepped outside to take a phone call. Two men, quote, sneakily followed him and eventually approached him for a brief conversation where they complained about his past reporting, alleging that it was untrue. He knew one of the men and at no point expected to be attacked. However, the other man allegedly attacked him and continued doing so when he fell to the ground. Eventually, two other random pedestrians pulled over to care for Nagar. They helped him come to his senses and called the police. I thank God that the attackers fled like cowards, further strengthening my resolve, Nagar wrote in a Facebook post shortly after the attack. I am especially thankful to Mr. Burhan Khan, who came to my aid and rescue at that moment. He said that he is not the first person and will not be the last to face intimidation and violence. Let this unfortunate incident serve as a reminder of the risks many journalists face daily, especially those who dare to speak out against extortions, organized crime, corruption, and injustice. Let it also be a call to action for greater protection of free press, not just here, but around the world, said Nagar. I remain committed to my work and to the principles of truth, justice, and transparency. No act of violence can change that. Journalism will prevail, and the truth will continue to be told. Now hopping into a Danielle Smith story. So hopping into the next story here, Premier Danielle Smith has been taking some heat for some recent comments she made on chemtrails at a recent UCP event when she was asked about it.
The best I have been able to do is talk to the woman who is responsible for controlling the airspace, and she says no one is allowed to go up and spray anything in the air. We have she's told me, the other person told me that if anyone is doing it, it's the US Department of Defense. And you know, like I have some limitations in what I can do in my job. I don't know that I would have much power if that is the case, if the US Department of Defense is spraying us. So I will do what I can to investigate, but everywhere I have gone, I have found no evidence that there's any private sector company involved. My environment department's not involved. My airports tell me that they have a record of every single plane that goes up. So I'm kind of dead-ended here. If you have some special lead that you want to give me afterwards, please let me know and I'll track it down.
Smith has been criticized by some left-wing ministers and Canadians for the very reason so many people love her, which is that she kept it real. Personally, I don't know that the Premier should have commented on such a controversial topic, but frankly, I can't find myself too angry with her for, as I mentioned, keeping it real. Some Liberal ministers felt differently. One of them was Employment Minister Randy Boissonnault, who might have relished at the opportunity to deflect some heat after allegations of conflict of interest and the other Randy scandal against him. Boissonnault went on to say that when he's door knocking, people won't talk to him if they think he's a conservative, suggesting that Albertans don't want to hear from or vote for the Conservatives, which of course we know based on every poll is not even close to reality, showing that the Conservatives in Alberta would easily win a majority, and so too would their federal counterparts.
I wanted to chat with everybody today about Alberta, and I think it's becoming increasingly obvious that Premier Smith is using her office to peddle conspiracy theories. This week it's chemtrails and misinformation about the RCMP. I simply don't get it. We've got a lot of issues in Alberta right now in a growing province. We've got an education system that needs more money for the teachers that are already there. We gave them $25 billion for our healthcare system that needs to be fixed. We've got an opioid crisis and a homelessness crisis. We simply need the Premier to do her job. And talking about chemtrails simply doesn't do the work.
How is she not doing her job? Why are you running against the UCP?
Well, I can tell you when I'm on the doors, people see me in a white ball cap and they say, if you're blue, we're not voting for you. So get off my doorstep. And so I take off my hat and they say, oh, it's you, get up here. There is deep frustration with Premier Smith and her government in Edmonton. We're still waiting for our $370 million offset payment that she gave to Calgary to build their new arena. She is simply not doing her job, and she's going off and stoking fears about somehow the U.S. putting chemtrails in the air. It's simply bonkers.
Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault also took aim at Smith for not standing up to conspiracy theories and launching accusations against the U.S. government. Guilbeault said, quote, "It's a very sad day for Canada and certainly a very sad day for Alberta." I'm sure that's the way many Albertans feel anytime they have to listen to Guilbeault speak. The chemtrails fiasco for Smith followed shortly after she offered her most recent and in-depth view on a few pieces of upcoming legislation, focusing on a few pieces around transgenderism and gender dysphoria. Smith's roughly 6-minute video posted to X features some of the exact legislation that will be tabled. She said that the legislation will be tabled in less than a month and will ensure that children have to wait to adulthood to physically alter their bodies for gender transition. Additionally, Smith said that this legislation will strengthen parental rights and ensure women and girls can compete in female-only sports divisions. The Premier said that the legislation follows extensive consultations with parents, educators, healthcare professionals, sporting organizations, and members of the transgender community. Smith said, quote, "While these are sensitive topics, our government believes these measures are in the best interests of children, and we will proceed with these changes without delay." She invited all Albertans to join the conversation so that transgender children know they are cared for and supported. Smith took a really compassionate approach throughout the video and ensured transgender children that she was on their side. Just take a look into this clip here.
We believe it's vitally important to preserve the time you have as a youth to gain sufficient amount of knowledge, experience, and perspective so that you can fully understand who you are, who you want to be, and what opportunities you may want to have as an adult before making permanent life-altering decisions related to your body. That is so very important to understand. And anyone who claims that these rules were designed to target or somehow harm you in any way are mistaken. Although questioning or disagreeing with these new policies is any person's democratic right, adults who choose to tell children and youth that these policies were designed to hurt them or marginalize them, that kind of rhetoric is irresponsible and harmful to the young people involved, and it is entirely false. I sincerely hope that we adults can debate the proposed legislation with maturity and compassion, rather than question each other's motives at the expense of the children and youth who will be listening to the debate.
Some of the specific legislation highlighted were protecting future choices of children. So licensed doctors are prohibited from performing gender reassignment surgery on youth under 18 in Alberta. Puberty blockers and hormone therapy for minors under 16 will be prohibited unless treatment is already started. Parental, psychologist, and doctor approval is required for 16 and 17-year-olds to access puberty blockers or hormone therapy. Parental notification will be required for a teacher or staff member to change a name or pronoun of a student or use it at school. 16 and 17-year-olds can make their choice on pronouns and gender identity, but parental notification is still required. Parental opt-in is required for each instance a teacher wishes to discuss gender identity, sexual orientation, or human sexuality. Materials or presentations related to these subjects must be approved by the Ministry of Education. Those born biologically male are prohibited from competing against women and girls in competitive sports, and this will apply to all Alberta sporting organizations, including schools and post-secondary institutions. I'll let you listen to Smith's conclusion.
In closing, I again sincerely ask that as we discuss and debate this proposed legislation, both before and after it is tabled, that we do all we can to depoliticize the discussion and focus on the well-being of the children and youth most affected by these policies. They each need to know that although adults may strenuously disagree on what policies are in a child's best interest, each of us loves and supports them in becoming the person they want to be regardless, and will be there for them if they ever want to talk or need our support. That commitment and care by all of us for these children and youth should not be questioned by either side of a political debate.
Jumping back into a Calgary story, the city is considering reintroducing a municipal census in 2027 in response to Calgary's rapid population growth and the strain on services from immigration-driven population growth. The biennial census was last conducted in 2019, but was eventually cancelled during the pandemic and has not since been reintroduced. City officials emphasize that the federal census, which is conducted every 5 years, is insufficient to address the immediate needs of a city experiencing a population boom the size of Calgary's. The study read, quote, "Calgary is experiencing rapid growth, and the 5-year interval between federal census collections is not frequent enough to provide the required information needed to inform delivering municipal services." The city of Calgary first conducted a civic census in 1931. It continued periodically until 1958, when an annual population count was introduced, which continued until 2019. However, the 2020 civic census was cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Later that year, in November 2020, funding for the civic census program was eliminated during budget adjustments. Migration to Calgary skyrocketed due to the city's affordable housing, which became an area of concern in August 2023, after receiving over 100,000 immigrants in the past 4 years and the expectation of an additional 110,000 in the subsequent 4. All 4 of Alberta's biggest cities saw interprovincial net gains between July 2022 and 2023. Despite becoming a desirable destination for interprovincial migration, even 1/4 of Calgary's residents said they considered moving because Calgary homes became too expensive in a July 2024 survey by the Angus Reid Institute. Calgary could develop a census internally, utilize licensed software, or contract the census to external providers. Each has varying costs, but the city's documents noted that the contractor-supported census is preferred. It would cost around $10.7 million between 2025 and 2030. The Executive Committee recommends that the City Council reinstate a biennial municipal census starting in 2027 and presents census funding requirements for consideration in the 2027 to 2030 budgets. The report highlighted that the census would help improve the city's social, environmental, economic, and service and financial implications. The 2 risks underscored were the cost-benefit analysis and data privacy. Some members of the public may believe that the benefits of a more detailed and more frequent population data is not worth the cost of delivering a municipal census, reads the report. However, if a municipal census is not supported, administration can only use federal census information, which is insufficient to help guide decisions in response to Calgary's rapid growth and change. It added that the city's administration could implement privacy risk mitigation in line with the Freedom of Information and Protection Privacy Act and other legislation. Despite being generally more pro-immigration than some other premiers, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has recently taken a stance against the Liberals' immigration policies after announcing emergency education funds to counteract record immigration. Her province's Alberta is Calling campaign was never available to international migrants, however. All right, people, this is the section you've all been waiting for. Since we did 2 Calgary stories today, I think it's only fair that we sneak in an Edmonton one for the last story that we're going to discuss today. So the NHL season starts on October 8th, for those who didn't know, which is this coming Tuesday, and the Edmonton Oilers play their first game on Wednesday the 9th against the Winnipeg Jets. A recent story dropped of the Oilers' captain, Connor McDavid, being highlighted for asking the coach to play more games. despite the many serious injuries we've seen across the league this preseason. If McDavid gets his wish, he'll have played 5 of 8 games. That's why he's our leader. He leads by example, said veteran Corey Perry. Everybody knows he's not the loudest guy in the room, but those little things, they help. However, I don't know if any of you saw, but the upcoming Amazon show did drop a sneak peek on just how loud McDavid can be, which some of you may have seen circulating on the internet. If not, I encourage you to give it a watch. It's basically just McDavid screaming swears at his teammates for not trying hard enough in the Stanley Cup Finals. But it is a rare look into what goes on behind closed doors. Oilers fans will remember the dreadful start the team got off to last season, starting 2-9-1. Obviously, it ended okay, getting to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, but still, I'm sure the team wants to have a better start than last year, but I don't imagine that'll be too hard considering the record they have to beat. But starting flat certainly won't be the method to do so. Let me know if you're excited for the NHL season to start in the comments. I know I've certainly missed sports in my life, given the dreadful baseball season from the Toronto Blue Jays. Speaking of comments, let's hop right into the comment roundup. Most of the comments from last week involved either thanking Smith or myself, so without getting too much into those, I'd like to thank everyone for their comments and especially their compliments. Coming in with the first comment from @rebelgran_01, who said, Albertans are so lucky to have Danielle Smith for their premier. I wish Ontario had a premier who stood up for the people of Ontario instead of lining his pockets. While I don't know anything about the last part of your quote, I decided to highlight this because a few Ontarians commented similar lines of thought. The most recent report from the Angus Reid Institute on October 3rd highlighted this phenomenon in Ontario. Interestingly, more than 4 in 5 Ontarians think Ford has done poorly on healthcare, cost of living, and housing affordability. Furthermore, Ford has a negative approval rating of -33. However, based on the same polling, the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario would win the election by a large margin. I think this might speak to Canadians turning against wokeism pushed by the NDP and the Liberals. Even when they dislike the leader of the Conservative Party, they're still deciding to vote for them. The next comment comes from @BarbaraMcKenzie1263, who asked where the $67 million for the federal guns buyback program went. Considering the program still has yet to collect a single gun, the money has been entirely spent on bureaucracy. When I spoke with Wes Winkle, the president of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association, he told me that he expects bureaucracy costs to end up costing, quote, considerably more than collecting the guns themselves. And this is hardly the first time we've seen this. With this federal government, you can almost imagine that with anything they do, bureaucracy will end up costing more than the projects themselves. Winkle said, quote, like everything the government does, the bureaucracy runs amok. And now we end up with these huge cost overruns because of the bureaucracy running amok. The last comment today was a tough one to choose, and I struggled between selecting a few, but we'll go with what @VXCocoXV said, which was, thank goodness, it should always be someone's personal decision and not the decision of an employer. We all seen what happened to thousands of people working. Your employer should never have any involvement in your personal health. What I wanted to discuss here was when and how did it ever become acceptable for anyone to ask you about your medical history? I think this certainly would not have been accepted prior to the pandemic when it became socially acceptable. Someone's medical history is among their most private business and nobody else's business. It's like when people ask me who I voted for. I'm sure you all could take a guess, but one of the vital key elements of democracy is the ability to vote privately without anybody else knowing about your business. So yes, I hope that employers butt out of our medical history and personal health along with everyone else. In closing, I'd like to thank everybody for staying tuned throughout the entirety of this Alberta Roundup, whichever number of the episodes it may have been that I've hosted thus far. Whenever I get into a lull or down throughout the week, I like to go through your comments and see all the nice things you are saying, but also the compelling points and anecdotes that you raise. Thank you very much, God bless, and have a great week. Also, good luck to your hockey teams, whoever they may be, unless they're playing the Oilers.